You knew what you were signing.
That's enough. What have you done?
It had to be done.
The Grand Aurora Ballroom shimmered beneath crystal subscribed this chainly chandeliers that reflected thousands of tiny stars across polished marble floors. More than 200 of the country's wealthiest entrepreneurs, politicians, celebrities, and investors had gathered for the annual Sterling Global Charity Gala, an evening where fortunes were pledged with smiles, reputations were polished with expensive tuxedos, and billion-dollar partnerships quietly began over glasses of vintage wine. Every guest wore designer labels, every table sparkled with silver and gold, and every conversation carried the weight of influence. Yet among the sea of luxury stood one man who seemed completely out of place. His charcoal gray suit was neat but several seasons old. His leather shoes had been polished so many times that the stitching showed, and instead of arriving in a limousine, he had stepped out of an ordinary taxi. As whispers spread through the ballroom, many assumed he had wandered into the wrong event. His name was Daniel Carter, but almost nobody recognized it. The invitation listed him only as D. Carter, and because he had insisted on attending without security or publicity, the organizers assumed he represented some minor supplier invited through a corporate sponsorship. Daniel preferred it that way. Years earlier, when he founded Horizon Capital Holdings, he had made it a personal rule to observe people before introducing himself. Wealth, he believed, revealed very little about character, but power often exposed it completely. Tonight he intended to finalize a confidential $1 billion investment that would transform a rising technology company into an international powerhouse. The executives expected a glamorous billionaire arriving with flashing cameras. Instead, the owner of the money stood quietly near the entrance, unnoticed. Across the room, Sterling Technologies CEO, Victor Langston, laughed loudly while greeting politicians and journalists. He had spent months negotiating with Horizon Capital, convinced that this investment would double his company's value overnight. However, Horizon had never revealed the identity of its founder. Communication had been handled through lawyers and financial advisors. Victor imagined an elderly billionaire from New York or Dubai, not someone who looked like an ordinary accountant waiting politely beside the coat check. Daniel accepted a glass of sparkling water from a waiter and admired the orchestra playing softly in the corner. He noticed employees rushing anxiously between tables while executives barked unnecessary orders. One young waitress accidentally brushed against Victor's wife, Monica Langston, causing a single drop of champagne to land on Monica's designer gown. Monica exploded with anger, humiliating the waitress until the poor woman fought back tears. Daniel quietly stepped forward, handed the waitress a folded handkerchief, and whispered, "Mistakes happen. Don't let someone else's pride become your burden." She thanked him with trembling eyes. Monica noticed the exchange and immediately frowned. "Who invited him?" she asked coldly. One of the event coordinators shrugged. "Probably someone from catering or maintenance." Monica rolled her eyes. "People like that should stay invisible." Daniel heard every word but simply smiled. Years of building a global empire had taught him that insults cost nothing to endure but often revealed priceless truths. As dinner preparations began, guests moved toward assigned tables. Unfortunately, a seating error placed Daniel at table 1, the prestigious table reserved for board members and major investors. Victor arrived, glanced at Daniel, and assumed the mistake belonged to the hotel staff. "Excuse me," Victor said with a forced smile. "This table is reserved." Daniel calmly showed his invitation. "It appears this is my assigned seat." Victor laughed. "Assigned? I'm sure someone mixed things up. Why don't you find an empty table in the back?" Several executives nearby chuckled. Daniel answered politely, "I'll wait for the coordinator to clarify." Monica folded her arms. "Honestly, these people have no shame." Before anyone could resolve the situation, a photographer asked the executives to gather for a commemorative picture. Monica, irritated by Daniel's presence, spun around too quickly while holding a glass of expensive Bordeaux. Her elbow struck another guest, sending the entire glass flying directly onto Daniel's suit. Deep crimson wine splashed across his jacket, shirt, and tie before dripping onto the polished floor. The ballroom fell silent. Instead of apologizing, Monica stared at him with disgust. "Well, now your suit actually matches its value," she said sarcastically, prompting scattered laughter from several influential guests. Someone even muttered, "Maybe he'll finally leave." Daniel looked down at the stain, removed a linen napkin from the table, and quietly dabbed the fabric. His face remained calm. The silence became uncomfortable because he refused to react with anger. Victor smirked. "Hotel staff will help you clean up. We have important people arriving." Daniel simply nodded. "Of course." He walked toward the restroom without another word. Behind him, the laughter slowly resumed. Meanwhile, outside the ballroom, Horizon Capital's legal team had just arrived. They searched frantically for their chairman, unable to reach him by phone because Daniel had silenced it before entering. One attorney asked the hotel manager whether a gentleman named Daniel Carter had checked in. The manager pointed toward the restroom hallway. "He's the man with wine on his jacket." The attorney's eyes widened. "Wine? Who spilled wine on Mr. Carter?" Minutes later, Daniel emerged wearing the same stained suit. He had cleaned it as best he could. Before he could return to the ballroom, Horizon's senior attorney approached him. "Mr. Carter, everyone is ready for the signing ceremony. The media is waiting." Daniel smiled gently. "Let's not rush. I want to observe a little longer." The attorney nodded respectfully, though confusion covered his face. Inside the ballroom, Victor proudly addressed the audience. "Tonight marks the beginning of Sterling Technologies' greatest chapter. Our future partner from Horizon Capital has committed $1 billion to our vision." The audience applauded enthusiastically. Giant screens displayed the Horizon Capital logo while reporters prepared cameras for the historic signing. Victor confidently announced, "Please welcome Horizon Capital's founder and chairman." He paused dramatically, expecting a famous billionaire to walk through the grand entrance. Instead, silence filled the room. Seconds passed. Murmurs spread among the crowd. Victor glanced nervously toward the organizers. Then the ballroom doors slowly opened. Daniel Carter entered alone. The stained wine remained visible across his jacket. Behind him walked 6 senior attorneys, 3 investment directors, international bankers, and security personnel who immediately surrounded him with quiet professionalism. Every one of them greeted Daniel respectfully. "Good evening, Mr. Carter." Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom. Victor blinked in disbelief. Monica's face turned completely pale. The same man they had mocked, dismissed, and humiliated before 200 guests was now being welcomed as one of the world's youngest self-made billionaires. Daniel calmly stepped onto the stage while the master of ceremonies struggled to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Daniel Carter, founder and chairman of Horizon Capital Holdings." The audience erupted, not with applause at first, but with stunned whispers. Reporters rushed forward, cameras flashing wildly. Victor's confident smile disappeared instantly. Monica instinctively lowered her head, remembering every cruel word she had spoken only minutes earlier. Daniel accepted the microphone. "Thank you for your warm welcome," he began, his voice steady and kind. "Although, I must admit, the welcome began somewhat differently." Nervous laughter spread through the crowd. Daniel looked directly at the crimson stain on his jacket. "This wine will dry. Fabric can be cleaned. But character leaves stains that no cleaner can remove." The ballroom became completely silent. No one dared interrupt him. Daniel continued, "For the past 6 months, my team evaluated Sterling Technologies, not only its financial reports, patents, and market potential, but also its leadership. Numbers tell us how a company performs. Character tells us how it will survive success." Victor stepped forward desperately. "Mr. Carter, there has clearly been a misunderstanding." Daniel raised a gentle hand. "There was no misunderstanding, only observation." Every guest watched breathlessly. Daniel described how he had witnessed executives insulting staff, ignoring mistakes without compassion, mocking appearances, and treating strangers according to clothing rather than conduct. "A billion-dollar partnership requires trust," he said quietly. "Tonight I discovered that trust cannot be purchased with elegant speeches or luxury events." Monica whispered, "I'm so sorry," but her words sounded empty even to herself. Daniel smiled sadly. Apologies offered after discovering someone's wealth rarely concern the person. They concern the consequences. Several guests lowered their eyes in embarrassment, realizing they too had laughed. Daniel turned toward the frightened waitress whom he had comforted earlier. "Would you please join me?" Trembling, she walked onto the stage. Daniel addressed the audience. "This young woman made a simple accident and was humiliated publicly. Yet when another accident happened moments later, involving me, no apology was offered. Interesting, isn't it?" Tears filled the waitress's eyes. Daniel announced that Horizon Capital would establish a nationwide employee dignity initiative, investing millions in hospitality training and workplace respect programs instead of proceeding with Sterling's investment. The audience applauded loudly, this time with genuine admiration. Victor's face collapsed as reality settled in. $1 billion had disappeared, not because of market conditions or legal complications, but because arrogance had cost more than anyone imagined. Daniel signed a different document instead, authorizing Horizon Capital to invest in a smaller technology company known for ethical leadership and exceptional employee satisfaction. The executives from that company, seated quietly near the back, burst into emotional tears. Their CEO had never expected to leave with the opportunity of a lifetime. Daniel concluded his speech with one final sentence that every reporter immediately wrote down. Never measure a person's value by the price of their suit, because sometimes the quietest guest in the room owns the future everyone else is trying to buy. Thunderous applause filled the ballroom. As Daniel walked toward the exit, the same guests who had ignored him earlier now stepped aside respectfully. Yet he never looked back at Victor or Monica. Outside, the night air felt cool and peaceful. Daniel climbed into the same ordinary taxi that had brought him there. The driver smiled through the mirror. "Good evening, sir. Did the event go well?" Daniel looked at the stained jacket resting beside him and smiled softly. "Better than I expected. Tonight, everyone revealed exactly who they were." The taxi disappeared into the city lights while, inside the glittering ballroom, 200 influential people sat in complete silence, realizing they had just witnessed the most expensive glass of spilled wine in corporate history.